Several years ago, approximately 10 years ago, a priest traveled to an island in Malaysia with his daughter and wife on a mission to bring the word of God to the natives. In the first few days, they were very well received, and the island inhabitants participated in the new church and visited the site every day. However, soon the followers of the local gods grew upset at seeing a white man trying to replace them in their beliefs, and shortly after, strange symbols and masks began to appear. It didn't take long for the church to be burned down. Back in the present, American teenager Toby ignores his father David's request for them to work on the car together to reminisce about old times, but Toby prefers to play on his cell phone. David decides to work alone anyway, and soon after he leaves, he is surrounded by a group of masked criminals who attack him with a knife before fleeing with the car. With the television on, Toby hears nothing until the car speeds away, and when he finally goes outside to see what it's about, it's too late. The case of David's death appears in all the news, and Toby can't shake off the guilt he feels. His mother takes him to see a psychologist who recommends a special program that takes traumatized people to an uninhabited island so they can have time to reflect and go through serious introspection. And Toby accepts. A month later, Toby is on a boat heading to the island, vomiting due to seasickness. This makes him the perfect target for a prank where he gets hit by the sail and thrown into the water. Later, after a whole day of sailing, the leader Kay explains that each group member will be dropped off on a different island and that they must stay there for 3 days and 3 nights. They receive a sleeping bag, a tarp, a lantern, a little food, and a flare they must use in case of emergencies. The next morning, Kay drops Toby off and reminds him he must be on the beach at dawn in 3 days. Seeing her leave, Toby recalls the night the police took his father's body, but then he forces himself to get started. He begins by making a really bad tent with the tarp while talking to himself to feel less lonely. Then he enters the jungle to gather some wood. He tries to grab some coconuts lying on the ground, but when he pushes the vegetation aside, he is shocked to find a small dead animal that reminds him of the day he found David's body. He decides to return to his tent without the coconuts, only to discover that a monkey has eaten half of his food. Then he tries to start a fire, but fails and only manages to hurt his hand. Afterward, Toby goes into the water to see if he can catch some fish. He accidentally steps on some shells and hurts his foot, but at least he finds some clams. His foot bleeds in the water, and that blood reaches one of the mysterious masks at the bottom of the sea. Later, Toby uses his knife to open the clams and discovers it has a magnifying glass, which finally allows him to start a fire. When night falls, he has the clams for dinner, but they make him sick. After throwing up, Toby enters the jungle with the lantern to look for the coconuts and drink something. But when he finally finds them, he hears someone running behind him among the trees. By waving the lantern around, Toby finally sees that the source of the noise is a sinister face behind a tree that suddenly runs away. Terrified, Toby runs back to his camp and lights the flare before passing out as memories of his father's death flood his mind. During the night, the high tide takes most of Toby's belongings away. The next morning, Toby mysteriously wakes up leaning against a tree, and there are already cut coconuts beside him. After refreshing himself, Toby is shocked to notice that there is a girl in the water, and when she tries to leave, he follows her. The girl suddenly turns around with a knife in hand, but ends up revealing that she doesn't want to attack Toby. She is just following the sound of an animal trapped in one of her many traps. The young girl's name is Madeline, and she explains that they can't stay there because it's dangerous, and then Toby follows her, noting just how lethal those traps are. He has many questions for Madeline, but she doesn't speak, except to share her name. They arrive at a dam that was built by missionaries, and Madeline lights a fire to cook her catch and share it with Toby. When they finish, Madeline announces that she is going home and that Toby can't follow her. Toby tries, but Madeline suddenly grabs the knife again, but it's to kill a snake that almost bites Toby. Before leaving for good, she advises him to stay close to the fire because it keeps the animals away, and Toby follows her instructions, falling asleep inside a makeshift shelter already present at the dam. At night, one of his father's killers finds Toby and attacks him, but it turns out to be just a nightmare. Now awake, Toby realizes that the fire has gone out and tries to start a new one, getting nervous as he hears noises in the darkness. Thinking it might be Madeline, Toby enters the jungle and finds a thread that shakes some strange decorations on a tree when he pulls it. The sinister figure appears behind Toby and tries to get closer, but as soon as Toby turns around, the creature disappears. The next morning, Toby wakes up in the shelter and finds Madeline already preparing breakfast. She notices the wound on his foot and takes him with her to find a special plant that will help heal it. She also tells him she has been on this island since she was a child, and that only she and her mother are left because her father died. When they find the plant, Madeline applies it to Toby's wound, explaining that you can't eat it unless you want to fall asleep. When she puts a bit of it on Toby's lip to prove her point, Toby realizes that his lip is now numb. The teenagers spend the day together, and Madeline teaches Toby everything she knows about survival on the island, from fishing to making shelter. In return, Toby talks about things like high fives and the internet. When night falls, Madeline needs to leave again, and Toby notices that she is heading toward the tree with the strange decorations. Madeline leaves a spear she made for him to protect himself and explains that if he follows her, her mother will kill him. She promises they can see each other again in the morning, but Toby explains they will pick him up at dawn, which hurts Madeline, who feels abandoned. Madeline runs to her house in the tree, and Toby stays behind to try to talk to her, so when Kay arrives on the beach at dawn, she sees no sign of the boy anywhere. Kay hears Toby shouting Madeline's name and enters the jungle with her lantern on to find him. But when she begins to hear strange noises among the trees, she trips and falls, losing the lantern in the process. Suddenly, Kay finds herself blinded by her own lantern, but when she comes closer to see if it's Toby, the light goes out and the lantern is thrown to the ground. When Kay tries to grab it, she notices two glowing eyes in the dark, and without warning, a dark hand appears over hers. For a few minutes, the only sound in the dark is the woman's scream. The next morning, Toby wakes up realizing he fell asleep while calling out for Madeline, so he needs to rush to the beach, but finds it empty. He sits to wait just in case they appear, and after a few hours, he notices a buoy floating. When he enters the water, he finds a whole trail of objects and follows it to discover Kay's boat floating upside down. To his surprise, Madeline's mother is swimming out of it with the supplies that were there. As soon as the woman is out of sight, Toby swims inside the boat to investigate and finds two flares inside a cupboard. But to his dismay, he also finds Kay's body behind a door. Terrified, Toby starts swimming away before he runs out of air, only to have his clothes snagged on another door. Fortunately, he manages to untangle them and return to the surface in time. Afterward, Toby enters the jungle and finds Kay's lantern with a strange scratch mark on it. Using this lantern, he decides to enter the entrance of Madeline's tree and discovers a rocky tunnel filled with bats and strange noises. The sinister creature approaches him from behind again and makes Toby drop the lantern, leaving him in darkness. The noises start getting closer, so Toby searches the ground until he finds the lantern and turns it on again, which suddenly allows him to see some really creepy drawings on the walls. Moments later, Toby finds the end of the tunnel and emerges to find what is left of the old burned church. He also hears a goat bleeding, and when he goes to check, he finds Madeline's mother killing it for food. He sneaks out undetected and continues looking for something. Then, soon he finds the cabin where the two women live. Inside, he finds Kay's empty bag, a box with 3 passports, and an old photograph that indicates that Madeline and her mother are the family that came with the priest all those years ago. There is also a can of gasoline, and most importantly, Kay's radio, which Toby immediately uses to call for help. He only gets one hello from the other end before the line goes dead, and at that moment, Toby needs to run and hide under the bed because Madeline and her mother are back. While the mother prepares a special concoction with the calming plant, she argues with Madeline because she thinks her daughter isn't ready to go out there. When Toby shifts further under the bed, to avoid being seen, he is shocked to find an extremely creepy mask and realizes that this is the face of the creature that attacked him before. As soon as the mother leaves the room, Toby approaches Madeline, but Madeline reminds him that this is dangerous and promises to meet him on the beach later. He sees a light blinking on the other side of the island and responds by lighting a bigger fire that can be seen from a distance. At night, Toby tries to sleep when he is suddenly startled by Madeline, who thought Toby would have left by now. He explains that Kay, the woman who was supposed to pick him up, is dead, and he thinks that the young girl's mother killed her. Madeline then rests her head on Toby's leg and shares the few things she remembers from her childhood. She used to be happy living with her family and playing with the local kids, but one day something happened, and she only remembers being in a corner crying while her mother, covered in blood, told her not to look. Madeline admits that she sees terrible things at night and that her mother probably killed everyone. Toby asks Madeline if she wants to run away with him because they will probably send a new boat soon, and Madeline agrees. But she will only come back the next day to avoid her mother getting suspicious. The next morning, Toby wakes up when he hears a plane flying by. But by the time he runs after it, it is already leaving. However, this run allows him to find an abandoned lighthouse that he begins to investigate. Unfortunately, the light isn't working, and when Toby checks its inner workings, he remembers everything David taught him about taking care of cars, which allows him to understand that the light needs gasoline. Then, Toby starts making his way back to the beach when he suddenly bumps into someone. It's Cameron, another one of the guys who signed up for the service. He was never picked up either, but he did find a rowboat, so he used it to try to find other people because his own island is definitely empty. Toby shares some food and tells him about his experience while making a new spear, which he uses to threaten Cameron when he points out that trusting a pair of crazy murderers is stupid. After apologizing, Toby explains that he refuses to leave Madeline behind because she is also a victim and goes looking for her. Moments later, he makes it to the house only to be surprised by the mother. The woman takes Toby's spear and lets him go to try to reason with him, but Toby, scared, runs away. The mother runs after him and accidentally falls into one of Madeline's traps, getting stuck between a tree and a thicker spear. Knowing she doesn't have much time, the mother explains to Toby that she didn't kill anyone. She was just trying to scare people away because the real murderer is Madeline. All those years ago, the locals tried to warn them that something evil was on the island, but the priest didn't believe them and tried to depend on the word of God. While he and his wife were arguing with the natives, Madeline took the chance to wander and approach the altar where the locals killed animals as offerings. This allowed the demon to use the child as its vessel in a ritual that matched the drawings Toby saw in the tunnel. It was Madeline who killed everyone in the church and burned it down, leaving her beloved mother alive. The mother then gives Toby the special plant in a bag to subdue Madeline and points out that she doesn't like the light when she is demonic. Before dying, the mother reminds Toby that Madeline should not leave the island. Meanwhile, Cameron is waiting at the camp when he suddenly hears some strange noises. He enters the jungle to investigate and comes across a pile of bones on the ground that distracts him from seeing the real danger. A demonic Madeline appears right next to him and drags him away through the trees to kill him. By the time Toby returns, only Cameron's blood is left. A noise suddenly makes Toby turn around and he sees demonic Madeline approaching with her mother's body, but she becomes human again when she realizes that Toby is a friend. She demands to know what happened to her mother, and to keep her calm, Toby tells her it was him who did it so they could be together. This makes Madeline happy, and she kisses Toby, pushing him to the ground to get closer. Toby loses the little bag with the special plant when he falls, so he pretends to be interested in her to recover it. When Madeline notices, she growls and starts to change, but Toby manages to find her spear and uses it to knock her out. Then, he puts the plants in her mouth to keep her subdued and uses some vines to tie her up. Afterward, Toby runs to the house to grab the gasoline and prepare a torch to light his way back to the lighthouse. He leaves the torch at the door to keep the animals away and then goes upstairs to finally turn on the light while remembering the time his father taught him how to start a car. While Madeline begins to stir, Toby waits for a boat, but seeing that no one is near, he decides to leave. When he goes down, the stairs break, causing Toby to fall and spill the gasoline all over the floor. It also makes him discover that the special plant grows here too. At that moment, the door closes on its own, and as soon as the rotating light points in the opposite direction, demonic Madeline sneaks into the shadows to attack. Toby manages to grab some of the plant before he is dragged away, but Madeline is too strong, and when he tries to use the plant on her, she turns his hands around to make the juice fall into his eyes instead. Madeline then jumps away when the light comes in again, so Toby uses the chance to approach the sink and wash his face. Floating in the water, he finds a glass shard, and when the light is dim enough for Madeline to attack again, Toby uses the shard to keep her away. Toby starts considering using the torch as well, but when he approaches the door, he finds little Madeline crying. He is worried about the child, but this is actually a trap, and the child reveals her demonic face before returning to her adult form and jumping on Toby. A boat can be heard approaching the island, so Toby needs to think quickly, because Madeline is in the process of possessing him too. Toby manages to grab the shard again, and when Madeline grabs his wrist to stop him, Toby improvises by turning the glass enough to make the light reflect on it and burn Madeline's face, causing her to back away. Then Toby runs outside and grabs the torch to throw it at the gasoline, starting a fire. Madeline turns human again to try to evoke pity, but Toby simply closes the door before running away. As soon as he makes it to the beach, Toby notices that the boat is heading towards the lighthouse, so he enters the water to go after it. Unfortunately, he is not heard when he cries for help, and the noise allows demonic Madeline to sneak up behind him and finally kill him. A few hours later, the rescuer leaves the island with Madeline on board, believing she is the person who turned on the lighthouse. As soon as the man gets distracted, Madeline reveals that she is still possessed and will cause more trouble in the city soon.